Let's look at one of my favorite areas, near-death experiences. Christian dualism notes that both the brain and the soul have a major impact upon our lives. Materialism would tell us that all of that activity happens just within the brain. So let's do an experiment. Turn the brain off. What happens if there's no brain? Do human beings shut down when the brain shuts down? Okay, that sounds a little bit weird because you can't exactly, turn someone's brain off for a while, then turn it back on and see what happens. Or can you? This is where near-death experiences come in. What do we mean when we say a near-death experience? A near-death experience happens when someone's physical condition shuts down, yet they continue to have subjective experiences. The reason we call it near-death is because from a medical perspective, you can only die once. If your body completely shuts down, but then is revived, from a medical perspective, you were not actually dead, you were just near death. So for that reason, we call these near-death experiences.
There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead.
But there are many fascinating examples of people who experience physical shutdown, including brain shutdown, but continue to have experiences, thus giving us strong reason to believe that people experience non-material phenomenon. Let's break this down into a syllogism. Premise 1. If conscious experience occur when brain activity ceases, then consciousness must originate from a non-physical source. Premise 2. Conscious experiences, such as near-death experiences, do occur during times of minimal or no brain activity. Therefore, consciousness must originate from a non-physical source. Let's look at a couple of case studies for near-death experience to see if they can verify the existence of non-material phenomenon. First, let's look at the story of Pam Reynolds. Pam Reynolds was receiving highly invasive brain surgery to deal with a brain aneurysm that had developed. In order to do this, doctors performed a highly complicated procedure called a standstill operation. This involves cooling the body down to crazy low temperatures and stopping all blood flow to the brain so that while the surgeons are working, they do not accidentally cut the patient and have them bleed to death. This means that no blood is going to the brain and it would be impossible for the patient to have any brain activity during this procedure. To ensure that there is no brain activity in the patient whatsoever, headphones are placed in the patient's ear and a clicking noise is made throughout the operation. Then, the patient's brain activity is measured to see if they're registering this clicking noise. If so, brain activity is happening and they must stop the surgery. But during Pam Reynolds' entire procedure, no brain activity was measured. Yet despite there being no brain activity, Pam Reynolds is having an outer body experience. Reynolds is able to rise above her body and view the surgeons performing the surgery. She was able to hear conversations people were having within the operating room and identify certain instruments that were being used to perform the operation. Despite all instruments definitively showing she could not hear anything, she was able to recall exact words from conversations had during her procedure. Then Pam Reynolds describes ascending through a beam of light into the heavens. In this place she meets family members who tell her that she is supposed to go back to Earth. Yet the longer Pam Reynolds remains in this heavenly place, the longer she wants to stay there. Eventually, Pam returns to her body and makes a full recovery. What is so fascinating about the Pam Reynolds case is she was always medically monitored for having zero brain activity. Second, we have verified phenomenon that she did not see or hear. Pam Reynolds could recall conversations and medical instruments that were used upon her, and this was later confirmed by all of the medical staff. Third, Pam Reynolds experiences existence outside of this realm of existence. Not only does she experience something on Earth, but she also experiences something heavenly, thus giving us very strong evidence for the existence of non-physical consciousness. Next, we'll look at Dr. Ibner Alexander. Dr. Alexander is a Harvard-trained neurosurgeon who contracted bacterial meningitis that devastated his neocortex, sending him into a coma for 7 days. Extensive brain scans were taken on Alexander during this time and showed that his brain was completely damaged with almost no chance of recovery. Dr. Alexander's medical team determined he had no chance of recovery and was not able to experience conscious thought or existence. Yet during his coma, Dr. Alexander experienced vivid near-death experiences. He went to a heavenly realm which he described as having lush landscapes and waterfalls. There he met a young girl named Elizabeth. After recovering from his ordeal, Dr. Alexander went to meet his birth parents who had given him up for adoption at birth. At their house, he noticed a picture of the young girl Elizabeth whom he had met in heaven. He asked about her identity and discovered that she was actually his sister. She had died in childhood and Dr. Eber had never had a chance to meet her, though she was the exact same girl Dr. Eber had met within heaven. What is particularly noteworthy about Dr. Alexander's case is that he is a neuroscientist who thoroughly understands the complexities of the human mind. Prior to this incident, he was a devout scientific naturalist, yet after this incident, he became convinced that consciousness exists outside of the physical realm and there is a divine realm. Next, we'll look at the case of Vicky Umenpeg. Umenpeg was born blind and has never seen anything that would be considered sight. Yet, when she was about 22 years old, she was involved in a car accident. During her medical treatment, Vicky has an out-of-body experience where she floats above her body and can see doctors performing surgery on her to try to save her life. After this experience, Vicky goes to a realm where for the first time in her life, she experiences visual sensation. She can see nature and colors and light for the first time in her life and can see people even though she has never had these experiences at any point in her life prior to this. Yet, when Vicky was resuscitated, her blindness completely returned. Since it is physically impossible that Vicky is able to experience any form of visual stimuli, the fact that she did experience it showed there must have been a consciousness existing outside of her physical existence. Vicky is one of dozens of individuals who were born blind yet had a near-death experience and experience visual perception for the first time in their life, thus creating very strong evidence for a conscious existence outside of the physical world. Oh! Those are such wild stories. The existence of phenomenon that cannot be attributed to a brain activity give us very strong evidence for the existence of non-material phenomenon, or a spiritual experience. Going back to our original syllogism, we can say that there is conscious experience that originates from a non-physical source, leading us to the conclusion that some consciousness originates from non-physical source, thus giving us very strong evidence that human beings are not merely material beings, but also spiritual beings. Great news! Something amazing with your soul today. If you want to know more information about near-death experience, check out the work of Gary Habermas. So, what was your favorite near-death experience? I love the neurosurgeon. I mean, that's kind of almost like too perfectly placed to be a real story. But you let me know, because you decide.